Welcome back, beautiful souls, to JoJo's Infinite Universe. And today we have a special guest. We have author Lisa Arrington, who wrote the book Rebirth, the spiritual evolution that reunited two souls. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you got to come. The first thing I want to do is I want to tell everybody about how me and you met. When I was going on my journey, which I had talked about in previous episodes, about once I got the vision from Jack that he said he was coming back, I didn't quite know how to process that information. So when I went online and Googled, that my husband's coming back, or what do you do when your husband dies, I couldn't find anything. But I somehow came across your blog and it was so beneficial. I then reached out to Lisa and she was so kind that she came on, or she allowed me to call her. We talked. I got some really good information of what to expect. And now we are forever friends. So it's just amazing how the universe works. Well, Lisa, I would like you to be able to share some of your story with everyone so they can get a little bit of a background of your book and your experience of your twin flame and them coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. So me and my twin flame, we shared a close to a 13-year long journey together. Now that includes about 6-ish years of separation time. So we dated when I was in my early 20s. I was actually in college and undergrad. We were so young back then that we had no idea how to handle such intense emotions. And of course, we had no idea what something like twin flames even was. So we were experiencing, all the telltale signs of twin flames, like rapid manifestation and mirroring, and not knowing how to handle it. So that led to our separation period, where I then actually got married to someone else who I presume is to be a soulmate, had a child with them. And in the midst of separation, a marital separation, Greg, my twin flame, came back, just wandered back into my life like divine timing. That was in 2019. And so I spent about a year and a half together with him at that point. And he sadly passed away from an overdose while he was in recovery in 2021. And so since he passed away, I experienced some crazy things, right? So the connection with him did not fade. It didn't stop. If anything, it got more intense and even more clarity to it. When he died, I, felt the actual moment that his energy left his body. At the time, I didn't know what was going on, but physically it manifested. I was able to, see signs of that in my own world. And from that point on, signs and synchronicities kept happening. And at first I shrugged it off like, oh, it's grief, it's in my head. And I also got that feeling, and to me, it was a promise of I'm coming back. So again, to be receiving all of this, and already kind of being like, whoa, is this grief? Like, this has got to just be in my head. On top of that, though, I received this, larger than life, out of this world promise. And so I decided, what the heck, why not follow this, see where it leads? There's no downside to me giving full faith, full trust, and believing in this and seeing where it goes. So I did that. And I actually, like you, found someone who actually does have their energy. So, yeah.
It's such a miracle, isn't it? It's a God's gift, I swear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I kept referring to it as like, wow, I am witnessing my own miracle unfolding right before my eyes.
I know. And you think you're kind of crazy at first because you're like, no, why would something like this happen to little old me? I'm not special, right? Like,
Yeah.
I I was shocked I could get it once, let alone twice.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the promise of his return, promise when I heard of Jack returning to me, that really pushed me to heal for this new version of whatever that looked like. I had no idea what it looked like at the time, but it did almost escalate my healing process. How did you start your healing journey after you got your news that he was coming back?
Yeah. Um, so, and I think you mentioned this in your previous episodes, and for those who haven't listened to the previous ones, I highly recommend go back and listen to the first 3 or 4, however many there are now, because you talk about feeling fully, right? And that's kind of how I approached it, is that it was vital and crucial for me to actually feel things fully. Um, and a lot of that was pain, right? Um,
Mhm.
and this sounds like it's negative or depressing because we're talking about pain and things like that. But really, this circles back to again that miracle. And I actually have in my book, I call it, I believe it's 9 steps to prepare for a miracle. And it talks about basically the steps that I went through, which of course was introspection, looking at myself, and there was actually an interesting question that came up on one of the twin flame boards that I saw yesterday, actually. And now that I think of it, I feel like it was meant for this discussion. But someone brought it up, and they're like, what is the difference between clearing the mirror, karmically in your own self versus clearing the mirror with your twin flame at a spiritual level? So that's another thing that was important for the healing process, was to shift my mindset to not identify with my body and my ego and my personal opinions, um, but rather to view things from the perspective of my soul, my energy, my essence, and also my twin flames, Greg's. And when you do that, you strip away all the ego and, the
Mhm.
he said, she said, and the guilt, the blame, and all that stuff. And you start to look at things through the perspective of only love. And because no one ever hurts you and with the intention of being like, I'm going to be a jerk to this person. They're reacting
Mhm.
to whatever harm, hurt, fear, doubt, whatever they're feeling. That's I'm not excusing them, that's not what I'm doing. But in this case, this comes from a place of unconditional love, and when you understand that, healing is much more realistic and much easier. I mean, it's a literal rebirth here.
Yeah, I actually, when I was healing myself, I was actually felt intuitively guided to send healing energy to him, even
Hmm.
though he was on the other side, to help him in his evolutionary path, which was, I just kind of let go and I just did whatever I felt like I had to do, whether it was to heal me, to heal him, to cry all day, whatever needed to happen.
Yeah.
Now most people would dismiss a message like this, or they would feel guilty and they would block it. How did you keep your mind open for the fact that Greg was coming back?
Yeah. So I have encountered people. So, since this happened, one of the things that came through to me through spirit, which again, when I accepted this kind of challenge to just go ahead and why not go ahead and believe everything that's coming through to me is true, so long as it was, validated in the way that I felt safe doing. Um,
Hmm.
you know, uh, One of the things that came through to me was to share my story. And so I published a little blog website, etherealsoul.net. And through that, I met a lot of people and with similar stories. And one of the things that they said was, that they couldn't fathom loving another person the way that they did their twin flame, or they felt guilty that, you know, their twin flame is no longer here, or that they get two loves and people spend their whole lives looking for one. And so again, the way to not shy away from this call, or that's how I see it, is, you know, like a call from spirit, like you answer the call of your purpose. This again goes back to shifting your how you value life, how you value yourself, how you love yourself. And if we love ourselves the way that our twin flame loves us, even if we love ourselves just a fraction of that, then of course we would want us to experience that love again. We would see it as a gift. We would be like, wow, I'm receiving this potential gift on a silver platter from my twin flame who loves me, you know, wants me to feel this love in return. Yeah, it's wild.
I found that's also where the magic is. When you can love yourself the way your twin flame loves you, it it takes away, it basically kills your ego. Like
Yeah.
it transcends you into a world that most people will never really understand or experience. And that's sad because that's what we're all designed to be here for, to love infinitely and to express ourselves as our authentic selves.
Yeah, no,
Um,
absolutely.
I spoke on previous episodes about some of the ways I knew John was Jack's energy. When you finally met John, how did you know that it was Jack, or I'm sorry, that you, how did you know that it was Greg's energy?
Yeah, and for the record, I kept up with that question even though you got the names mixed up, because on Facebook, he set his display name to Jack. All right, I'm gonna botch this name. Jack Napier, whatever. His first name was Jack. So I used
That's
to like,
crazy.
yeah, so I recall seeing Jack. And so when I hear Jack, I do think of Greg. So it works out either way. And my new person's name is John. So,
I know all the
yeah,
synchronicities.
yeah, the synchronicities are wild. And so to answer your question, that's one of the biggest ways that, I kind of looked for confirmation is in the synchronicities. You know, pattern recognition, is such an important skill set for us as human beings, right? That's how
Hmm.
we derive meaning. It's how we can confirm things, and you know, same with like the in science, the I want to say keep saying hypothetical, but that's not it. Gosh, the of course now I'm blinking, but you know the steps, the hypothesis. You right? You
How
go,
about this? Hmm.
yes, and you confirm it by if you can recreate it. Essentially, that's a pattern. If you know the pattern of the
Hmm.
results of your hypothesis. So these synchronicities, they are so much more than just saying, "Oh, I heard this song on the radio," or "Oh, I saw this number on the clock." The universe and potentially our loved ones are actually giving us the answers through these patterns. It's up to us to recognize them. And there were some pretty crazy things, really strong synchronicities that came through when I met John. One of which being 2 weeks before I met him, I took up the practice of meditation. I'd never meditated before in my entire life, until Greg passed away. The signs kept coming in through so strong. I literally rose my hands in the air, like kind of frustrated, being like, what? What? You have my attention. What do you want to say? And I laid down and meditated for the first time. I had a 3 hour long crazy experience. Didn't even try. It was wild. Um, anyways, so 2 weeks before I met John, I was meditating, and I had this vision of someone's face come through, and I sketched it down. I am not the best artist. I am also not very, what's the word, clairvoyant, where like
Hmm.
receiving things visually isn't necessarily my
Hmm.
forte. So the fact that this came in so strongly stood out to me. Um, so I had met John, and maybe a few months into it, we were talking about how he actually had a son. And I wasn't aware of this at first. His son had passed away as an infant when I believe he was 2 weeks old, something like that, from like a heart defect. It's very sad. And just something kind of irked at me when I learned about this child. I'm like, wait a second. I remembered that drawing, and so I flipped back to it, and I'm like, that's John. And I'm like, no, 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 something's not right here. And some time passed again, and the next time we talked about his son, I had to go for it, right? I just had to forget what he might think of the question and just go for it. And so I asked him for a picture of the mother. Um, and sure enough, as soon as I saw it, ding, 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 that's what I drew. It was, her smile was just, that was it. It was her smile with John's features. And I straight up told him, I'm like, I believe this is Hunter. And like, you want to talk about confirmation. Confirmation is having someone who is so logical and so, needing that scientific proof and evidence to believe something. John didn't push back on this idea, like didn't even like flinch at it. If anything, I saw in his eyes at the moment, I saw belief. Like I saw happiness and like that I think he felt that truth. Yeah, so again, that is just one of the many. I could keep rambling on.
It's funny you say that about the synchronicities because I never really understood synchronicities before Jack died. Like I saw, them here and there, but I understood the concept, but it wasn't like after. Like after he died, they've been everywhere all the time. And just between me and you know, you just said Greg was also known for this Jack name. Greg's the name of the person that got me and Jack together. Uh, Greg and Jack are both Aquarius on your side. Uh, both of our second twin flames names are John,
Yeah,
and they're both Leos,
yeah,
which are crazy. You drew Hunter. I drew John before I met him. We both got tattoos for our deceased loved ones. And both our Johns, the second twin flames, both told us they were going to marry us like super early on and intensely, which totally took me off base.
yeah. Oh yeah.
um, For me, falling in love with John while I was grieving Jack was easier than I was expecting. Like, the whole time I was healing and trying to anticipate what this was going to be like and how I was going to navigate it. When I was actually navigating it, it was never like what I thought it was going to be like. I don't know if that was somewhat because John had already lost a twin flame, but he was so understanding. He gave me the space to talk about Jack and cry when I needed. Plus, there were times where he said things or did things that Jack would do, which was kind of a little trippy at times. How did you navigate the beginning of your relationship with John and your grieving?
Yeah. And so, but before I go into that, I want to say something because there's two things that came into mind, and before I lose it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, so you mentioned that your John had lost a twin flame prior to
Mm-hmm.
you guys meeting. Um, and after hearing that, I wondered if the people involved, and by people, I mean, the walk-ins or the ones who come in our lives to continue the twin flame relationship with us, um, the people who have lost their twin flame. I wonder if our counterparts, if that's, I don't want to say a prerequisite, but if maybe that's more of a probability, is that they are already entangled in the twin flame collective. Like with John, when and it's actually funny because I technically had known of him before he and I actually met. Um, his ex-girlfriend and I actually worked at the same place when I dated Greg. So there's actually a point in history when myself, his ex-girlfriend, John and Greg were actually all in the same room. We didn't even know it. It only happened once, but yeah, but I actually
That's kind of
remember.
interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay.
Me and
Go
me
ahead.
and John me and John lived in Pittsburgh at the same time together, but we never met. And but yet he came down to Florida right around the time Jack was broke his hip when he was dealing with his cancer. So somehow there had to have been some type of connection to say, okay, it's time to come down now, because the timing was just like the same week. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. These points of connection to me just bring it all home. I mean, like, what are the chances, And um,
And his twin flame, Tanya, the
mhm.
year she died, I almost died.
Wow.
Like, so there was that too. So there's been lots of different things that have connected the four of us in some way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. And gosh, I just had like 10 different things that just came to mind just from what you said just then. Gosh, and it'll pop back in my head, of course, like when I'm, yeah, it's overwhelming, like these synchronicities. Oh, that's what it was, is that what the night that I had actually officially, formally met John, we went out to a bar and, just kind of a casual hangout spot. Because, again, like I met this person on Facebook, wanted to be safe, go to a public place. And it was actually the bar that Greg had worked at before, and it was right up the street from his childhood home. But I wrote that off as coincidence simply because it was one of the only locations in that area. So, but you could look at it either way.
Mhm.
But like, so as soon as I walked in the door, I remember we caught eyes from across the room, which is literally what we did a long, long time ago at the place where I worked at with his ex-girlfriend. We caught eyes in the same manner, very briefly, but it was like, so much information was transmitted in that moment. Um, so that occurred again. It was almost like this activation. But our conversation actually started with a discussion of loss. Greg had died 5 months prior to this. John had just lost someone, I think a few months from this point. Um, and, again, like I said, now I'm wondering, was the person he lost actually perhaps his twin flame? And we're both caught up in this. And it's not just me, like I originally thought.
It could very well be. Um, yeah, like I almost feel like when I look at some of our life, all four of us, I sometimes like to look at our lifetimes and the experiences we had. We all had different scenarios or different outcomes at times, but similar scenarios, or the opposite. Like Jack had a very rough childhood, um, and John did not. John
Mhm.
had a great childhood. Um, so there were differences, almost like if we look at all of us as a collective, and we all had to experience different things so that we can, as a soul level, collectively all are getting the information, you know what I mean, that each of us had to experience different things in order to bring all of that experience to our soul
Yeah,
that we share in some way.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So how did you navigate your grieving while you're falling in love with this other person?
Yeah. Geez. So, my situation might be slightly different simply because, um, Greg and I had dated, like I said, back when I was in college. Um, and when we broke up back then, I mean, like I said, the emotions, the feelings, everything was so intense. I literally told myself, never again. I just, I might as well get those words tattooed on me. Like it was that intense. And I treated him as if he was dead. I literally had to. That was the only way that I could move on. in my life and not be distracted, or not feel that connection, not feel that pull towards him. I mean, I could tell when he was thinking of me. I could tell when the phone was going to ring and he was going to call me. I mean, that, if I was, in my early 20s, I wanted to find a life partner. I want to get married and, buy a house, have a kid. I want to do all these things, but I still had this crazy connection. So I literally mourned him. I grieved him back then. Um, and little did I know that this was going to be a precursor or preparation for for his actual passing. Um, so when Greg actually did pass away, um, one thing that did kind of hurt and break through this kind of grief is that back in the day, he wasn't ready to be together. I was ready. And then the second time we were together as adults, he was ready. I wasn't ready. So the tables had turned and it was so frustrating. It's like, man, we just could never be ready at the same time. But grieving him, I I feel like I skipped parts of or steps of the grief process because, like I said, I had already gone through it. But not only that, I feel like even if I hadn't gone through that, the connection was still so strong with him, even, in his metaphysical form. Even, the days where I was like, no, 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 I don't even want to like try to believe that that's real, that there's life after death or what have you. It still came through equally as strong. Like there was no denying it. So it's hard to grieve when you're receiving love. It's hard to grieve when you're receiving these positive emotions and these feelings of they're going to come back. Um, it's a very different mindset in that sense.
Agreed. It is a definite difference in grieving. Totally. Like it's like your mind understands and can logically put the reasoning. Like when I go back and I look at when Jack had passed and I look backwards at all the events that had to happen. And if I was not a part of them, oh, the situation that poor man would have been in would have been horrible. So knowing that I got to be his angel on earth
Yeah.
gave me a lot of comfort,
Mm-hmm.
but my body did not care.
Mm-hmm.
My body had to grieve that energy, had to release that energy. And honestly, it took me over a year for my body to catch up with my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you had any of that similar situations, but I noticed like I didn't have the energy or the fire to do things. I would cry sometimes unexpectedly. But it has only been, let's say, the last few months to where I fully feel kind of put all back together again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm I guess grateful to say that I did not go through the stereotypical grief. I mean, now there are times like for example, February 6th, which wasn't that long ago, that was what would have been Greg's, I think, 35th birthday. So of course on that day, I just unexpectedly burst in tears and things like that. But as for the grief actually, bringing me into a state of low motivation and things like that, it truly was the opposite. Be, because like I just Greg left me with a lot of letters and notes. He he wasn't that good of a verbal communicator, and don't consider myself to be either. And so we we'd write each other notes or letters, even if we're sitting in the same room. If there's something really important or deep or emotional, we'd write. And So after he passed away, I poured through all these letters again and again, actually. And I mean, the stacks and stacks and stacks of these letters. Um, and throughout them, there was a clear theme that he wanted me to feel loved. He wanted me to understand how to love myself. Um, and that's hard to ignore. It's hard then to be down in the dumps about, oh, this person passed away, when you know that they want you to feel that love. And not only that, but when you know that they're still alive, even if your physical body wants them here, of course you're going to crave and miss them, but it's hard not to acknowledge the truth. And that's what this situation helps us do. It helps us shift, and it helps us actually acknowledge life for what it is.
So I told John everything, including the vision, right from the get-go. I think I even told him the first day I started talking to him, which for most people would sound crazy.
Yeah.
But I just felt like the conversation just kind of naturally went there for some reason. You took a little bit more of a cautious approach, wanting to make sure that, John was Greg, or at least had that same energy.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to tell him about the vision? How'd you tell him, and what was his reaction?
So the vision about Hunter took me a while, simply because it was about his child, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider myself to, well, I mean, technically, sure, I'm like, quote, psychic or a medium, but in my mind, I consider myself, just to be adept to energetic abilities. So, I don't claim to be over here like, oh, I can give you messages from your loved ones. Like, no, no, no. And I didn't want it to be perceived that way either. Um, I also didn't want him to think that I was saying this um, just to try to, um, make the pieces fit somehow. I wanted to make sure this was authentic. Um, and so while I didn't share the vision of Hunter with him for a while, I did let him know. I let him know about Greg, the first night that we met, of course. Maybe I want to say 2 weeks, but I feel like it might have been a little bit longer. Um, maybe a month into it is when I really told him what was up and what I felt. Um, Now, 2 weeks into it, I think we did have an experience together where we experienced, little bits of telepathy, rapid manifestation, even distance tantra, or some people call it different things, but basically being stimulated without touching one another. Um, we experienced these very energetic things, which I don't believe John had ever experienced before himself. Um, and so again, that's another reason why I kind of waited, is because, I think your John may have been more familiar with this stuff. Well, my person,
Not really.
oh no, not really. Okay.
No, because he had a very similar situation. We'll say the second half of your relationship with Greg. So
Mhm.
he had a short period of time, and then during their separation, she had passed. So he
Okay.
didn't get to experience a lot of it um, prior to me.
I see. Okay. Did he was he at least aware of things like, the shared thoughts, or how you can feel what the other's thinking or feeling and things like that?
I don't think at that time his mindset was at that level to recognize it.
Ah, okay.
He
Got
did
it.
a lot of the deep work right before I met him on understanding how that stuff worked.
I love it. It's like,
Mhm.
oh man, it's like, he was prepared, the
Mhm.
universe prepared him for you. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Very
Yes,
cool.
that's kind of how I feel about Jack sometimes.
Yeah, I
um
got messages from Spirit. I think I might have mentioned one of the steps that I took in this process was to try to get to know my spirit guides, right? Like my soul family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they gave me messages. The messages became stronger and clearer leading up to meeting John. Um, but they essentially told me that whoever the person who would come into my life would be ready, ready to go. Essentially, they would be free of any karmic cycles. Greg was here. He
Mm-hmm.
did have some karmic stuff to clear up. And so they made a
Yes,
point
so
to say, okay, no, you're not going to have to deal with that this time around. That's not to say that there wouldn't be work to do. Um, and that uh, the person would be, um, at least on the spiritual side, healed and ready to go.
mm-hmm.
There is some lingering, like,
So
yeah, go
when you
ahead.
talk about healing,
Hmm.
one of the biggest things that twin flames are kind of known for, if you will, is to put a mirror to yourself and help you heal the things within yourself that it's very hard to do on your own. Um, they mirror a lot of our triggers back to us so that we can heal them within ourselves. How do you address the triggers when they are mirrored back to you? And have you noticed that these escalate your evolutionary path?
Yeah. Oh goodness. Handling mirroring can be quite a handful. I mean, it can work, in both directions. You can use it to mirror something good, right? Like something that you'd like to see happen or healed in the other person and vice versa. So that, gosh, I don't even know how to answer this question in a clear, concise way, just because it is tied to so many other things, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm still dealing with mirroring, with me and John, and I think that's why I'm kind of struggling to answer the question, is because I'm in it right now. Um, I know with Greg, he passed away before we, could put a label to what was going on and define it and work with it. But
Mhm.
after he passed, I did take advantage of um, the mirror effect, and kind of realized that, okay, if this is going on with me on my end, then, it's going to be affecting him. And what I put in, I have basically as much power and control over this as he does. So, if there was something where, he made me feel a certain way, um, and it's like, oh, well, I want him to do this, or I'd rather this or that. Um, this journey has kind of shined a light on the fact that I'm perfectly capable of using that effect to our advantage. And I said our advantage, not my advantage, because this is for the betterment of both of us. Um,
Um, so what have you learned in this process about being in a healthy relationship?
Boy, that's a great question. Man, the biggest thing is to love yourself. Because I mean, geez, even just talking about mirroring, right? If you don't love yourself, well, guess what? You're gonna mirror the effects of that
Mhm.
uh, to the other person, and then you're gonna cause the cycling effect of that. Also, and something that I've learned back all the way back, in my college days, in my first round of being with Greg, was how just detrimental doubt and fear can be in a relationship. Um, Doubt and fear crushed us at that point in our relationship. It caused Greg to engage in infidelity and lies and cheating, all because um, I was going to college in Charlotte, North Carolina. He lived closer to Raleigh, North Carolina. It's about 2.5 hours away. Um, and so he had issues with trust. And this was nothing that I did. I had never
Mhm.
done anything or said anything that would cause him to to, think otherwise. It was an issue of, he hadn't healed his past traumas and issues from past relationships and experiences, and he hadn't worked within himself to learn how to love himself, to feel worthy, um, and to feel confident in his own skin.
So, Lisa, we have talked about that when I was, Googling for information. I was having a really hard time finding resources to help guide me or help me to understand what to expect or where to find resources that navigate these uncharted territories, if you will. Since you've been in this arena a little bit longer than I have, what kind of advice could you give to someone who's newly grieving, that's going through some of these situations that we've gone through?
Yeah. Yeah, and I had this same issue when I first was searching for answers as well. I could not find any credible information or information that really resonated with me. Um, and I did find some good things on Quora, the message boards. Um, and so I guess the first part of this answer is other people who are connected. So, for instance, I had a best friend of mine who hadn't been in my life for, gosh, over a decade, who also knew Greg. She came back in my life after he passed away. Just again, it's like divine timing. It was like fate, like it was meant to happen. She was actually the one who, uh, through talking to her, she was like, "You guys are twin flames." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" Um, so talking with her, and she shared her spiritual experiences that she had, and the person she lost, and so on and so forth. And that then gave me the reassurance to be like, okay, it's not just me. Um, and not only that, but of course, it's always helpful and comforting to talk to other people while you're grieving, right?
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Another is again, because there weren't any good resources for this, and I kept finding there's more and more people like us. People are going through this. They are losing their loved
Hmm.
ones. They know that they are connected at a higher level. Their relationship with their loved one doesn't stop when that person dies. Well, what do they do about that? Where do they go? Right. Um, so I created a little Facebook group. It's actually, I think it's at 999 members today. Um, it's called Twin Flames and Soulmates Grief Support Group, for anyone in this type of journey. Um, that's a very, very helpful thing.
Hmm.
It also has links to some of the articles on my website as well, that answers a lot of the questions, like what is a walk-in, how is this even possible that you can be still connected and feeling the love from someone who's no longer on this earth, things like that. um, yeah, I really do believe in the power of the twin flame collective, essentially.
It's funny you say about the collective, and I never heard of the word twin flame till after Jack had passed either. And it's funny how now you're hearing that word which you've never heard before. And I keep saying it's because now is the time. Now is the time. If there was any other time in history, now is the time for our evolutionary, jump, if you will. It's the
Yeah.
first time in history that we've had access to as much information that we do today, that people can go out and create their own realities based on their own information, their own beliefs, instead of being fed the information that mass media wants you to read or see. um, and and this is the time. I know there's a lot of chaos going out in the world right now, but I've never been more optimistic for
Yeah.
change, and to see the world change for the better. Yes, it might go through some growing pains, but it's weird. Like, I have this overall just feeling like everything's just working itself out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I 100%. I feel the same exact way. Like it on the surface, it looks like chaos, but and like Ralph Smart and other like kind of YouTubers or people who talk about this are saying the same things, that what's happening is, we're going through this like evolution. We're ready for, concepts like twin flames, where, that's human history is all about, that again, expansion of senses or consciousness, um, even back from like biblical times, getting up and out of our ego and out of that single-minded consciousness. And twin flames is the perfect tool to teach us that through love, right? Teach us that, not necessarily, that we're going to be over here married to 10 people at once, but to teach us that, true love means, it extends beyond just, oh, I'm with this one person in my life and they're mine forever and that's it. No, don't rob yourself of love. Get at it. Like, no, understand that, the person you love is their soul. It's their spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their body. So, expand and open up to that. And just the world is just, shoot, even the quantum field, right? Understanding how that works, and manifestation concepts make sense. So it's a wild time we're living
Quantum
in.
entanglement. Everybody's just quantum entangled. um so with your journey, like we said, twin flames aren't, fairy tales like it seems from the outside. Yes, this is a huge miracle, but it takes a lot of work to get
Mm-hmm.
these to have these relationships work for you and not against you. So with that being said, what have you learned during this process in order to bring you a healthier relationship?
Yeah. The number one thing that I've learned is to love yourself. Not just love yourself. Ooh, gonna be nice to myself. I mean, truly, really love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that does mean, like you said, doing the work, loving yourself, like loving the little quirks about you. I mean, because that's what, when we lose someone, when they pass away, those are the things that we miss about them. We miss their smile. We miss the way they laugh. We miss the silly way they dance or something. And when we think about those kind of quirks in our own selves, those are the things we hate about ourselves, that we give ourselves a hard time about. But that's what makes us who we are. Those are the things we should cherish. And if we can get ourselves to a state where we love those things about ourselves, and we miss those things in ourselves, right? We can say, oh man, I really miss how I used to just jam out to this song and so carelessly and freely, like, and see those things. We're able to then love others fully and freely, and give them the love they deserve. And going back to concepts like twin flame mirroring, that's why this stuff is so important, is because we're constantly mirroring uh, things, or even to our friends and family that we're connected to. Our energy is constantly exchanging and transmitting with them and affecting them too. Um, so yeah, and this also affects um, everything from boundaries to communication as well. If you can love yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you can absolve the doubt and the fear, and a lot of the things that then cause the biggest pitfalls in relationships.
And it's funny you say about a healing, your the family. So have you noticed, as you heal something in yourself, that your family, the closest members, your parents, and then your children, well, your child's probably a little young yet to be able to recognize those changes in them, but do you notice as your parents start evolving a little bit more as you're healing stuff?
I will say that I have seen changes in both of my parents, one more than
Mm-hmm.
the other. Um, Now it's difficult because they are in, that they've recently kind of entered into that older stage of life. They're preparing to be in their senior years. So they're kind of, on one hand, it could just be the natural progression of their life. But on the other, the timing of it is very interesting. And just the ways in which they're changing is interesting. For instance, it's more on the spiritual side of things, or being more accepting of concepts where in the past I would be like, whoa, there's no way they would, even be open to this kind of mindset. So I'm just, for full disclosure, I'm born and raised in North Carolina. We're in the Bible Belt, Southern Baptist, to give some kind of idea of the background here. So yeah, things are definitely evolving. And it's a very cool feeling to know that, you have that empowerment and that you play that role in their lives as well. Because again, that's true love. True love is getting and helping others, have that free and full mindset and evolve in that direction.
Well, Lisa, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. Can you please tell people where they can find this great book of yours and how to find you online?
Sure. Yeah. So the book is Rebirth. Like you said, Rebirth, the spiritual evolution that reunited two souls. It is available online on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and websites like that. You can also find the book, as well as a lot of good resources about twin flames. There's also a twin flame loss study as well. Some really cool data in there at etherealsoul.net. And my social media profiles are at etherealsoul444.
Well, Lisa, I want to thank you again. I look forward to maybe some more collaborations, me and you. We got plenty of more stuff we can talk about. I could sit here for hours.
Oh, yeah.
But I definitely would love to have you back on. And I want to thank you all, beautiful souls, for being here and joining us. I hope this information was helpful for you on your journey. Please like, subscribe, share so these messages can be given to people that need them. Next week, we have a new surprise guest. Stay tuned and have a magical week. Love infinitely, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. If this week's message spoke to you, please share it so that it can help someone else too. If you need advice or are interested in being part of the show, you can DM me on Instagram or email me at jojosinfiniteuniverse@gmail.com. Until next time, love infinitely, my friends.